Hi friends, welcome to episode 125. The weather was lovely on Thursday, but yesterday we had 1 centimetre of rain, or whatever that is imperial measurements. Anyway, it's still raining out there, so I'm not going to be able to do any painting today, but today it should be dry. So maybe I'll be able to get those primer coats on those metal bits that are piling up by Titan 890. I have a little bit of news on the air diverter valve. Neil Sergeant, who's agreed to take on the work of repairing it, gave me a call during the week, so I'll do a little bit on that later on. So unfortunately, this weekend it's going to be more of that Rexine, although with most of the cream Rexine finished, I'm hoping I'll make a start on the green, and then with any luck, the brown. So anyway, we're certainly getting there. Let's see what we get done this weekend after I put the kettle on. Well, unfortunately, the weather was not going to play nice this weekend. It was going to be, although the weather forecast said it was going to be dry, surprisingly it was foggy and damp and sort of like misty rain. So it was still far too damp in the workshop to do anything. I really wanted to paint those panels. I'm getting really frustrated that I can't get the spray gun out. But anyway, so the things are piling up on the front of Titan 890 waiting to be done. But like I say, there's still plenty of that Rexine to be getting on with. So let's make a start with the Rexine. Right, this is one panel, but two of several attempts at that cream. Apologies for the coloration being different. It's probably I took them at a different time of day, I think. Anyway, but it is the same material. The biggest problem with this Rexine is this cream Rexine is really thin, and you can't really manipulate it as much as you want. With the thicker stuff, you can push it around a bit and it's okay. With this, unfortunately, it just starts to tear. And there's a couple of places where it's torn into the visible area. I don't mind if it tears the bit round the back. Not bothered about that. No one will see it. However, it just will not take it. So what I did was, the final trick last week was I got a large weight and placed it on stretched it over a workmate, and then put that weight on it and left it all week with the intention that by the time I got in on Saturday morning, it would have sufficiently stretched the Rexine such that I can get it in. Now the biggest problem is that corner there. I just cannot get the Rexine to sit in there. And then of course, because the Rexine is really thin, any problems or any lumps in the glue are almost immediately evident. And this isn't the same. I haven't got this with the green. The green is fine. The brown I've used in the past, absolutely fine. And the cream I used upstairs, because this is a different batch that I got, no problems whatsoever. But this stuff is an absolute bloody nightmare. I don't really want to give up with it. Roy Gould popped in and suggested that what I should do is get some white Rexine, which is slightly thicker, and then colour match it with the existing Rexine and just simply paint it with a little bit of matte dropper in it, so that sort of a gloss inhibitor, to drop it back down to the right colour and the right texture of all the rest. I may end up having to do that. Someone else also suggested, why don't I just simply paint the metal? The problem is that metal work is battle scarred. You're going to struggle to get it to look nice. It's just not an easy thing. The final option, if I don't do that, is to hand it over to Paul Toomer, who's going to do my seats at some point over the Easter period. So possibly I'll give it to Paul. I have already mentioned it to Paul, and he said, well, I'll give it a try, not too sure. But this is an absolutely horrid job. And the problem is where it sits at the very front of the bus, everybody it would be sort of, it's like sitting in a cinema, I suppose. You're looking at the front of the bus. It'd be absolutely evident. Oh, I don't know. So that's a complete pain. The other option, I suppose, is to maybe use the green, which is far more flexible, and then simply paint that and see how that goes. But I have horrors of the paint coming off and then showing the green underneath. So I don't know. But anyway, so that's that. So with this cream stuff now, almost bar these horrible panels done, and there's 2 of them, by the way, one either side of the bus, done, I can now get on with a farechart holder. And the farechart holder had been hanging around inside the barn for 35 years, and it's picked up all of this dirt and it looks really scabby. But when you look at this, this is the general condition of almost everything that came out the lower saloon of the bus. You know, these were not preserved. People, I mean, Alden was a fantastic place, 100% to all the people that worked there, and the credit to these guys and girls that worked at Alden and the care and love they put into buses. But towards the end of the life cycle of these vehicles, obviously the motive was to just keep them on the road for long enough before the scrap man can come and take them away. So they did what they felt was necessary, but they're not going to make them look like brand new buses, and I don't think that has ever been the objective of Aldenham or anybody else other than us in preservation. So so sadly this thing's absolutely filthy, but indicative of the rest of the bus. So let's try and transform this into something quite usable. One of the first things I need to do is get these bracelets off. These are, I mean, they come up quite nice when we manage to clean all the paint off of them. But the first thing I want to do is get as much of the paint off the screws as I possibly can. That little piece of cardboard there is basically just to protect the glass, because it is possible for me to slip off what I'm doing. And I don't really want to slip off and then scratch the glass, because I want to reuse that glass. I do have a spare one. Sorry about my head, gets in the way quite a lot, doesn't it? I do have a spare complete frame and glass around the back of the barn, but I really don't want to have to use that if I, unless I absolutely have to. And the great thing about this video lark is we can put everything on fast forward, do a little bit of music in the background. So here I am stripping this frame down. They do have to put screws absolutely everywhere on RT. Just when you think you've met the last one, there's a dozen more. Anyway, so what I was really after was these things. These are the 6 little Rexine pieces that came off the frame. So what I need to do is to do these and get them ready to go back on. Plus the fact that those little bracelet bits also need to be tidied up as well. So lucky for me, Kevin Forecast popped in on Saturday morning and immediately got given the role of polishing these little bits off of that frame. So yeah, thanks very much to Kevin. He spent ages doing it and they've really come up very nicely. So thank you, Kevin. But before I leave this shot, these two bracelets, the bottom one is one that's about 2/3 of the way there. The top one is one where I've cleaned all the paint off and I've run a 400 grade wet and dry over the top of it and makes all the surface go like that. But what is really weird is you think, oh, it's going to be terrible now. But surprisingly, they polish up really nicely. The main thing we needed to do was get rid of those scratches. They were not scratches from me using the wire brush earlier on. They're actually more resilient than that. So each time we spotted a scratch, we then went back to the 400 wet and dry and so on and so forth, to eventually we got rid of most of them. But I did say to Kevin, he worked very, very, very hard on them, that we were not going to get rid of all the scratches, and probably nobody had noticed anyway. But they really do come up lovely, so it's worth the effort. So meanwhile, while Kevin was doing that, I was cleaning this frame. Obviously, in this case, I'm going 5 times more than my normal speed. I only move at that speed when I go to get a kettle and make a coffee. No, only joking. Anyway, yeah, so I want to give this a bit of a clean and get as much of the grub and dirt off of it that I could possibly can. That glass is going to clean up really nicely as well, so I'm quite happy with that. But I do need to flip it over and do the other side as well, because the other side has got sort of somewhat grey paint on it. Overall, it's in really good condition, this frame. I'm going to keep those 2 little yellow things that you see there. That's 2 little bits of Rexine which sit underneath. I don't know why they put them there, but there's obviously a reason for them. So I've kept them. I've put them to one side. This brown, I was in a bit of a dilemma. I'm going to think I probably will spray this when the weather improves. But there we are. So there is the dismantled farechart holder. So all I needed to do once that was dry was pop a little paint on it. So thanks very much for Kevin for filming me doing something for once. I will need to come back to this at some point, but I want to do that brown at the back, like I said earlier on. I'm probably going to end up spraying that, and I need to sort of put the whole frame back together again. But nonetheless, just for a bit of fun, I thought I would mock up on the desk what it might look like when we've finished it. So here is a sneak preview of what we're trying to achieve. So there we are, a chance to put 2 pictures side by side. There's about a day and a half's work in that, actually stripping it down and doing all the Rexine and cleaning all those little bits up. But I'm very grateful for Kevin for putting his head round the door and agreeing to spend several hours actually polishing all of those little bits and pieces. So once I pop that back on the frame, I do think that's going to look really nice. And I'm actually, I tell you what, I'm in 2 minds. I know I shouldn't do this, but I really do want to put that back in its correct position. Everything else has ended up upstairs where it's safe and away from all the dust. I've got so many dusty things to do downstairs. I've got to sand down the floor at some point before we put the new flooring in. And the sad thing is, dust gets everywhere and it will probably get spoiled. But I'm really in 2 minds. I'd really love to put that back, just so that when I'm sitting inside the bus, I can say, oh, that looks good. Anyway, so there we are. So let's move on. Still sticking with Rexine. Roy Gould's got quite a lot of stuff for RTs. He's collected it over the years. And one of these things, this is Rexine that was made by Ratchford's. It's not exactly the same as the Rexine I used upstairs, which I got from that firm in Leighton or Leytonstone that I mentioned in a previous edition. And I'm going to, I don't think you're going to notice, or you guys and girls will, because if I do all of the lower deck inside with this Rexine that Roy is supplying me with, then I think it'll be all right. I think it'll pass. But I just didn't have enough. I had enough of that Rexine to do probably 2/3 of the lower deck, but certainly not enough for a safety margin in case I make a mistake and I need to throw a bit out. Plus the fact that a couple of panels are going to be in odd. So hence the reason why I needed to buy quite a bit of it from Roy. Roy's got this roll, and if anybody wants to get in touch with Roy, his details are in the description below, so you can contact Roy, and I'm sure he'd be more than happy to supply you with some sort of authentic RT Rexine. So there's Roy. He popped in. Actually, I promised Kevin we were going to go down the chip shop and get some fish and chips. And just as we were packing up, ready to go down the chippy, Roy turned up. But sadly, poor Roy ended up having to sit there for about an hour while we went down the chip shop and came back again. So, but anyway, thanks very much, Roy, for turning up with that roll. And that gave me a little bit, and I'll come to this later on because I was really itching to try it out, this brown Rexine. So anyway, we'll do something else in the meantime, and we'll come back to this later on. I know I said in the intro that I'll give an update on this diverter valve or unloader valve, whichever way you want to call it. I've owned this RT, as you're well aware now, for just over 40 years. And I ran it about for probably about a couple of years in preservation to and from rallies and everything. And very honest with you, I've never had any problems with the air system. The air system was good as gold, and of course, as soon as I park it up, as you know, if you've seen these before, you'd know that the fuel pump, the injectors, and all those things that were all absolutely okay have all gone pear in the 35 years that she's been sitting in the barn. So Roy came down with his test gauges. We just couldn't work out what on earth was going on. And thanks very much. We did an appeal on one of the preservation group websites on Facebook, and some people come up with some names to try. And I've gone to Neil Sergeant, whose nickname, aka, is Air Brake Neil. And in fairness, he knows an awful lot, and I sent him a picture of it, and he straight away was able to give me the relevant part number just on the basis of a photograph. And he sort of ummed a little bit and said, I'm not sure, but you know, getting parts for that thing is going to be really tough. But anyway, I boxed it all up, sent it off to him, and he phoned me up in the week and he said, bad news. He said, I don't know. He said, how it ever worked. Unfortunately, this diverter valve it seems that somebody at some point in its career has made a right bodge up of this, I call it diverter valve. I think it realistically is called unloader valve, but I do apologise there. They made a right old bodge of it, and apparently inside are two completely different components, which Neil said really shouldn't be there. But he did try to take, if you have a look at the top of the shot there's a large nut in that casting, and he tried to get it apart, and he said, I just can't get the thing apart. And he's heated it up, he's put a long bar on it, he's tried absolutely everything, and he's worried that he's going to shatter it. So we're now back on the market for trying to find a replacement, because this thing, one, it's bodged, two, it's totally seized. And yeah, the only problem with RT brake systems is there were actually two. There was a Westinghouse, which is the least popular, or say least popular, but was lesser in number, I think it's a better word for it, and then Clayton. And lots of people have told me how to fix Clayton air systems, but it's not a Clayton air system, it's a Westinghouse. So I need to get hold of that unloader valve to get the whole thing working. But Neil said to me, he said, I'm really surprised it ever worked. And I had a chat with him on the phone. I said, look, you know, it's probable, and I'm just entirely guessing here, that when the bus was running for London Country, they had a terrible part shortage in the mid-1970s. And they really had to do a lot to try and keep the buses on the road. They were borrowing buses. Chelsham had a load of borrowed buses from all over the place. And sadly, they may well have had to cut some corners to try and just keep the buses on the road. So I think that this possibly is a product of that, sadly. I know Brian Watkinson will say that London Transport will never do such a thing, but I think it's happened since then. So there we are. So now we're back in the market to try and find another one. Neil's trying to phone a few people up to see if he can find one. And I've had a quick chat with Brian Watkinson as well to see if he can help out as well. So if anyone knows where someone is breaking an RT that has the Westinghouse, not the Clayton, braking system, please drop me a line ASAP, and I'll I'll bite your hand off for that. So thanks very much, everyone. So that's a quick update on the air system on the RT, and it's very important I get this fixed, because without it, the bus unfortunately is just a museum piece that don't go anywhere. So I really have got to get this fixed. Right, so back to the plot. Having come back from the chippy and had our fish and chips, and Roy has departed back to Kent, I thought I'd take the roll and have a look and see what it's like. It's got a few crinkles in it, which is going to cause a bit of an issue. I did have some crinkles in the other brown as well, I must admit, and I took it home and actually ironed it. Now, you might recall from a few days back that my brother had brought an old iron up to the barn, so I thought I'll give that possibly a try to get some of the crinkles out. But the first thing I'm going to do now is use a rather crinkly piece of old masking paper. If you've watched these before, you'll know I like to keep reusing the masking paper until eventually it finally gives up. So what I've done is I've used this to create a sort of a basic template for the little piece that goes down the side of the long seat on the rear bulkhead. And the plan of action is that I've now made a decision. I'm going to put this back just to try it out and see how it works. So hence the reason why I've done that. Now, it doesn't matter if anyone points out, says, hang on a minute, Dean, you know, there's a rubbish template. And you'll notice later on I end up cutting it, and I cut it all really wide. The reason is I like to leave a lot of extra space on there, so I'll never end up with it hopefully being too short. Because it's too short, I have to go in the bin. But too wide, we just get the Stanley knife out and cut it down. So there we are. So there is the first bit now removed from that roll. Right, it's not often you see me get an iron out. I'm going to use this bit of cotton to just see if we can iron through it. The iron actually is quite hot, and my idea is to try and get rid of as many of those crinkles in it before I put it back in the bus. I did both sides actually. I cut one for the sort of near side of the bus and one for the off side. This one you're seeing me doing is the off side. So what I want to try and do is just remove as many of those little creases I possibly can. It does come out, friends. So yeah, so it's okay. And I'm sure that once I get the glue out and then stretch it about a bit, there won't be any space for those crinkles. So there I am, giving the Rexine a little bit of an iron. I'm using this spray adhesive glue. This is my third and final can. I've gone through 3 cans of this stuff, and they're not cheap. So anyway, with that white Rexine, you can see where it blotches up on the edges. There's not a lot you can do about it. It doesn't come out like spray paint, by the way. It just comes out like this. Where it blotches up on the edges, that is where it seeps through the white. The brown is much thicker, so I should probably have to get away with that. But I now need to wander off and do the bulkhead as well. So this is inside the bus. This is where that bit of brown Rexine's going, just below the farechart holder, which has got the sticky tape on it, and like the boost socket. So and that's down the side of the seat. Now I will point out only about 2/3 of that Rexine are actually likely to be visible. I have already applied the glue. Unfortunately, there's no nice way of filming this. I fitted the camera onto one of the beams that runs across the floor upstairs. And the good thing about this glue is it allows me to reposition it, and it is absolutely essential that we reposition, because we do get air bubbles and sometimes it doesn't look entirely right, and I end up having to reposition it, which you'll see in a minute, me moving it around. So that is me fitting the Rexine on. I will shift it around. Just above that is the farechart holder frame. What should happen is, once I get myself out of the way, sorry about that, what should happen is that frame you saw earlier on will fit into there. It's hinged off the bottom there where the sticky tape is. The reason for the sticky tape is I had, just before I'd done this, I'd fitted the felt. See that dark area just above my head? That's black felt, so they all had this little bit of felt in there, and the felt that was in this had disintegrated and came out in little bits, so I removed it. I'm not entirely sure if that felt was the right thickness, but we'll find out when we put the whole thing back together again. So there I am, fitting in this brown Rexine. I mean, it's going to look really nice when this is finished. I'm really quite pleased with it. So all these little jobs that sort of, you know, you think, I don't know, it's not going to go well, or it's, you know, they actually start to make it look like a bus again. So yeah, she's I sat there and looked at that, and I thought, actually, I'm quite pleased now. So there we are. That is that little corner done. And I did the other side, by the way, but here is a photograph of the almost finished product. So, right, I'm going to wrap here. Thanks very much for watching. If you got this far, well done. And yeah, it is really slow, isn't it? Wouldn't it be really nice if we could just wave a magic wand and then it's all done? Maybe one day we'll have a chat about some people's views that it is really easy doing up an old bus. It is very, very difficult. And those sort of AI videos that some of you have probably seen where they go, an old Route Master bus has been done up in, I don't know, 10 seconds or so. You really can't do it like that. If you want to do it properly, that's all rubbish obviously, but if you want to do it properly, you've really got to put the effort in. And sadly, it's also quite costly as well, but there we are. But I think this is going to be worth it. And of all of my buses, this is the one that I hold dear to because it was the very first bus that I ever bought. And yeah, I think she deserves to go to the party. So there's 3461. Thank you very much for watching. And as usual, YouTube will come up with something that yeah, maybe you might like to watch that's totally different to fiddling around in a damp barn on a Saturday and Sunday. So thanks very much for watching, everyone. I look forward to doing the next one. See you next time. Cheers. Bye.